All right, this video is going to be about the details of the eye and how to do a contour line drawing of the eye. So let's start by talking about some don'ts about the eye. So first of all, no eye is round, okay? No eye is oval, right? It's somewhat almond shaped, okay? But there's a little bit more specific than that. First, when you talk about the top curve of the eye, and I'm going to draw it with the nose over here on this side and the eye on this side. The top part of the eye is a bit steeper curve than the one beneath. Okay, so this is a bit steeper, and it's steep here and has a long curve that slopes off over here. Here it's more flat and curves up over there. And so the thing to remember when you're drawing the eye, it's composed mostly of two lids. And the lids, the first thing you need to remember is that they have thickness. So the lower lid, I'm actually going to draw an additional line in here that really demonstrates that this lid has thickness. And I'm actually going to kind of bring it together right there. And so to really see the thickness of that lower lid. And I'm going to go ahead and label a lot of these parts. So this is going to be the lower lid. Okay. So that brings us to talk about the upper lid. Now we don't usually see that other line on the upper lid, and the reason for that is because of A, the shadow of the upper lid, and B, the eyelashes that are on the upper lid. So when we start talking about the eyelashes, most of these eyelashes are going to obscure the thickness of that upper lid. And most of what you're going to see is going to be about those eyelashes on the upper lid. The eyelashes, in general, depending on the angle, are going to be pointing away from the tear duct over here. And in general, there are a lot more eyelashes on the top than there are on the bottom, but they are both on the top and the bottom. Alright, so here we have the eyelashes. Okay, that should be 2 words, but we'll worry about that later. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the white part of the eye. Now the white part of the eye is called the sclera. S-C-L-E-R-A. And the reason we point that out is because of this tear duct over here. You can see a separation in the eye between the sclera and the tear duct because the eyeball is actually this round sphere. And you kind of start to see where that round sphere kind of comes to the edge of this tear duct in here. So here we're going to have the tear duct. And here's the sclera. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the iris. Now, one thing that the iris is a circle, right? But we never draw it like that as a circle because the lids of the eyes almost always obscure it. Typically, it's obscured on both the top and the bottom. That's how big the iris is. It's almost always bigger than what you think. If a person is looking up, you might see the white of the sclera underneath the iris. But or if someone is super scared and their eyes are super wide open, you might start to see it. But and you get that idea of the eyes popping out of their head. They're so surprised. But in general, it's always covered by the top and the bottom. For the most part, individuals do vary. So the next part I'm going to draw is the iris. That's this color part of the eye. And I think in general, more of the top is covered than the bottom, but it depends on the person and obviously the direction that they're looking. Okay, so we'll go ahead and label that the iris. And the next thing is the pupil. Now, the interesting thing about the pupil is not actually there. The pupil is actually a hole. It's the hole in the iris, and that's that hole that allows the light to come in, and which is why, while it appears black, it's not truly black. It's just a hole, and it's dark inside of your eye. And the reason why it's dark is it needs to be dark so it can allow the light to come in and just focus on what you want to look at. So the iris causes the pupil to expand or contract, letting more light in or less light in. So the pupil could be very small, which means it's super bright out, or it could be very large, which means it's very dark, or the pupil also will let a lot more light in if you see something that you like and there's something pleasant to the eye. Your pupil will open up. So, but we want to do an average pupil, and I like to think of it as thirds. So if you think of it, a third, and a third, I'm going to draw the pupil. Oh, that's a little bit too big. But if that's a third right there. So 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. I did draw it a little bit too big. But that just means maybe it's a little dark in this room. Okay? And we'll go ahead and label that the pupil. Now, today we're only concerned with our contour lines, and we're not going to think about shading or value or anything like that. Purely the contour lines to get the form of this eye. Now, the next thing we're going to be looking at is this fold of skin. Now, above the eye, some people have it, some people don't, but there is this little fold of skin that kind of goes around the eye. It's when the eye opens up and kind of the upper lid kind of folds in on itself, and it creates this little line. The shape of it varies greatly from person to person, and actually the shape of that line, as well as the shape of the eye, is really important to capture for every individual to really kind of capture that person's personality. So it might look like this. It might look much more rounded. It might be bigger. It might actually split into two lines. Some people might have a line that's underneath the eye as well, though that's less common. It's all going to be all due to the individual. And so we're going to label that the eyelid fold. Okay. And lastly, the one thing we're going to put here is the reflection. The reflection on the eye is really important because when you're drawing, and usually it's the last thing you add when you're drawing or painting the eye, but that reflection is important because when the eye is wet, it feels alive, and it feels like there's definitely a lot of life looking back at you when you have that reflection or highlight. Now, the size and shape of the reflection is going to be determined by the size and shape of the light source. So if you're in a room with 3 or so lights, maybe they're ceiling lights and they're like rectangular, like classroom lights, like typical, then you're going to have rectangular reflections. If it's a round light, it's going to be a round reflection. If it's out in the sun, it's going to be a small circular reflection. But however many light sources is how many reflections you're going to have. But essentially, I'm going to think about this as being one rectangular reflection right there, and I'm just going to draw a little arrow to it for the reflection. And that's going to be based off of the size, the placement, the shape of it. It's going to be dependent on the size and shape of the light source and the distance. All right, so we're going to move on to a contour line drawing of the eye. And this is just like the contour line drawing of the fingers that we were doing, where we want to do it one continuous line and really go slow, try to capture all the details and try to capture the form, and really think about all those parts that you're trying to capture in this one contour line drawing. So here we go. I'm going to be looking at a person's eye and trying to capture the details. I'm going to start here the shape of the eye. Try to find what I see. Not picking up my pencil. Try to get the thickness of this lower lid into the separation of the sclera and the pupil. And come up here, and I'm gonna, even though I would normally pick up my pencil on these eyelashes, I really want to try to limit that as much as possible. Here's my iris. Come in here for my pupil. We get a little reflection in there. Come over here and try to get this eyelid fold. And there we have it. A continuous contour line drawing of an eye.